Dobry wieczór, cześć. Tu Kaja Klimek, bardzo mi miło. Pozdrawiam wszystkich bardzo serdecznie z Octopus Film Festival. Dzisiaj dzień ostatni, jedno z ostatnich spotkań, oczywiście w bezpiecznym, super bezpiecznym dystansie, bo na wielką odległość moim gościem jest scenarzysta i reżyser filmu A Fire in the Cold Season, Justin Oakey. Hello Justin, nice to meet you once again.
Nice to meet you as well.
So what did you understood from what I just said, apart from your name and the title of the film?
That was it. I know. No, I thought I heard. I thought I heard film director in there, like director or filmmaker. A word that seemed like that could be what it was.
Yeah, I said Octopus Film Festival, so I guess that's what could also transfer. But I also said that we are in this super safe distance. Because we are talking like I'm here in Poland, in Gdańsk.
Very safe.
Very safe. But what I wanted to start is actually the place, because you are now in Newfoundland. That's your home country, and that's also the place that you shot your film. So that's what I wanted to start talking about. How much the place that you come from and the place that you choose your film to be shot in, are those places the same for you, or when you step outside of your home country just to shoot it as a location, does it really change anything in your heart and mind as a director? I'm like super curious because my home place, which is like a really specific region in Poland, also really determines me as a person. So I was really curious how much it influences you and if it's really possible to just like take a step back and just like shoot it as a location.
I feel like it's very difficult for me to remove myself from the location as a part of my identity. Like very similar to what I've heard about Poland. I have some Polish friends, and where I live and where I grew up and everything about it is very much a part of my identity. And even right down to in Newfoundland, and I'm sure Poland's the same way. In Newfoundland, depending on where you are, the accents are different and the dialect is different. So if I write something for a specific location, I can't remove myself from knowing that they wouldn't say this there and they would say it this way. And so it's hard. Like I get a little bit hung up on, sometimes you want to shoot somewhere and it'll look amazing, but it doesn't make sense. Like just in your heart, it doesn't make sense. And so it is a little bit difficult to remove myself. When I write these films, I tend to write them with locations in mind. Mm-hmm. So there's location scouting happening, but generally when I shoot them, I know more or less where I would like them to be set. So it makes it a little bit easier, when it comes to finding locations, but then it also becomes more difficult when I can't get the location I want because it was probably in my mind for 3 years. When I write films, I find that the stories are sort of they're woven together with my identity and with the identity of this place. Newfoundland is a very, very specific place. It has a lot of history. I mean, it's the oldest place in North America. And
you also have it in the name, right? Newfoundland.
Yeah,
so it really is out there.
To be fair, the Vikings found it, 1,000 years ago, and then the French and the other Europeans came after. But there's a lot of history here, and it's very hard. Everyone is so connected to the land and water, and I feel like writing a story about Newfoundland, it's almost impossible to write it without Newfoundland playing its own character. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to remove yourself.
So, but when you, because you said that you were writing with a bit with the locations in your head, so did you feel like, oh, now I'm going to show you what this place that I come from is like? Do you really feel at least a bit like, I'm not sure if this is a correct term to say it, like a tour guide of your... like your homeland in a way.
I've made the comment before because I'll go to film festivals. I'll be in Berlin, and or Cannes or something like that, and you're talking to a film producer from, anywhere, and most people don't know where Newfoundland is, even though it's
Same
it's
with
quite
Poland.
hard.
Poland. Is it Holland or Poland? That's really
no
common.
Idea. They've heard that, the best case scenario is that they've heard the word. because it's been on some, National Geographic or something, but they've never looked up where it is. So it becomes a little bit more difficult. And I've used the word, not tour guide, but I've said that I'm an ambassador.
Oh, that's nice.
It's a fancier way to say that I really do feel like when you make a film that's so tied to the location, most of the film is taking place in small towns and in the hills and in the forest and all that sort of stuff. So when you're doing those things and you're showing off where you live and there's accents and there's dialect and he's a fur trapper, and that's a really popular thing here, to be a fur trapper.
Yeah, I can see that even behind you. This fur things and all of that.
Antlers and furs piled up in the junk back there. Mm-hmm. But when you start showing those things off, you do start to feel like, okay, well, I'm showing off this place to the world. And so you tend to be mindful that, you don't want to make it into a cartoon either. You want to be real as you can. And that's always in the back of my mind that, for example, if it screens in Poland, that might be the only time someone from Poland has ever seen Newfoundland. And so you don't want to be too dramatic about it, but you also don't want to be too dark either, because everyone will think it's a miserable place. So it's kind of like you have to find a balance in the middle, right?
Yeah, that's true. But is it a miserable place? Because in your film, we can see a lot of this social realism. Actually, that's what comes to me. I can see those characters. We're going to talk about genre, of course, in a moment. But I can see those people that they are struggling, really. And it's really hard. And even if there is a money included, that somebody owns somebody money, it's not like a big bag of money, it's just like a like a portion, I would say, not thousands of dollars or anything like that, but just some money. So it really feels that it's not really easy to live there, not on the level of that it's cold and it's far away and so on and so forth, but also on this social and community level. Can you talk a bit about how is to live there, basically? Because of course, not so many people in Poland have a chance to really hear how's that to live there.
Well, Newfoundland, it's sort of there's two situations going on. So the reality of Newfoundland is, I guess the film is representing one thing, but there is a different reality. So my reality in Newfoundland and the reality for a lot of Newfoundlanders is Newfoundland is a very, very, it's an incredible, if I could just turn my camera around, there's a hill and the ocean is right there. I'm right next to the ocean. A lot of people hunt and fish, and you can live off the land and you can live in small houses next to the ocean. It's a beautiful, incredible, beautiful place. The other side of Newfoundland is that we've had a bit of difficulty financially because we were our own country. We were a sovereign state for a little while, and then we essentially, everyone says it was a vote, but we got sold to Canada. And ever since then, there's been a lot of up and down with industry. So, while Newfoundland is arguably, I've been in a lot of places, and Newfoundland is one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's incredible. It looks like if Iceland and Ireland had a baby. It's incredible.
That's a cool description of a part of the world.
Exactly what it is. You get the big rolling grassy fields, and you also get these barren cliffs, and it's just amazing. But the problem is there's so few people here, and our industries tend to collapse because of the government. So the film is portraying a side of Newfoundland that is beautiful. The first shot of the film in the Fire and the Cold season is a beautiful landscape that I use I actually hunt there. I've been hunting there my whole life. And so it's this very important place for me. It's a beautiful shot, but then the reality of their lives is that there's no work, and everybody owes each other money, and people that used to work in an industry, say oil, there's a discussion in a bar scene where they used to work in the oil fields, but they can't. And that's a pretty common thing here when an industry is growing and everybody can depend on it, it goes away. And that leads to more crime and things like that. So Newfoundland is not really a criminal place, and the film sort of pushes it a little bit too dramatically. But the reality that I'm trying to get out there is that while it's beautiful, it can be a bit of a struggle. It's like living in, it's remote and things like that. So that's that line I was talking about. You don't want to be too dramatic, but you also don't want to make it seem like everything is perfect here all the time. It's not,
of course.
Right? So,
and when you are a geek, film geek, or you watch a lot of films, when you see the way you made the film, you know that it's like genre cinema. So you feel that, okay, there's this, that's the world, and now he talks about the life of the characters, not only about people, but also about those figures that we can see. And if it comes to this loneliness and remoteness, I really love the shot when we have like a shot of the forest, and we only when you look close enough, you see that there's the guy walking through the forest. He's like a super tiny figure. So it really, that was really striking with the images. That's why I asked you about how you try to distance yourself just to show the story through the images that you know so well. So that was the thing. But I started to talk about genre cinema. So we have this like social realism of the life of people in there, but you decide to mix genres, because of course you can say that it's kind of like a Western frame or noir frame. Whatever you look for, you're gonna find it, because those little blocks of genre, you can feel that they are there. So tell me a bit about your attitude towards genre cinema, like, and how you can use it to tell a story that you have in mind with the specific and so close to your heart location at the same time.
Yeah, genre cinema. I mean, I'm a big fan of, I watch a lot of genre stuff. I used to watch a lot of horror, and now I tend to lean towards. I've always loved westerns and thrillers and noir and things like this. And my first feature was very, very, very small, like barely any money. So when you do that and you have no money, you tend to just do social realism, and you don't need a lot of money to do people having like tense conversations. So I lean that direction. But when I was doing this film, my intention was to always essentially frame it like a Western. Like if you break down the story beats, a lonely man sort of drifting, meets someone who needs help, the other bad guys, just like a mistaken identity. It's all structured like a Western. Mm-hmm. But then when we started making it, I didn't really want to shoot it like a Western. I just wanted it to have a Western feeling. So we talked a lot about, okay, well, instead of horses, they're all going to have big pickup trucks and things like that. And so we had these little Western vibes. Like I feel like we also discussed, me and the cinematographer, James Klopko, we were very specific with filming it in a way that felt like a Western, like a lot of big landscapes. All the close-ups were in profile. And so little subtle things like that. Like we haven't even mentioned the word Western to people, and people feel like it's a Western, which I feel like that's what's so interesting about genre movies, that there's such a language behind them.
Yeah, that's true.
And, and by the time you get to the third act, there is a lot more noir stuff going on, a lot more sort of thriller things going on. And you don't even have to tell people that it's a thriller. They pick up on those cues because there's an established language. And I think that's really interesting, that you can basically tell a story. I feel like most of the film is just a drama. Like it's mostly just a dramatic, social realist kind of film. But because genre is so powerful, you can just have these little moments that sort of explode out of nowhere, and everyone will start saying, "Oh, it's a Western. Oh, it's a thriller." And it's kind of cool because, that little lighting change kind of makes it feel a little bit more horror film for a second, and then those sort of things were really interesting to experiment with. And when you don't have a lot of money and you want to branch out, it's really fun to explore genre, and I think that genre fans in particular are the most open to all things that come in at them. Like a lot of people who are sort of watching these art house films or say drama films will be a little bit, they're not expecting something to come from left field, whereas genre fans are really open to it, and that's also been exciting.
Yeah, because it's a bit like you are throwing a ball and we are like those seals in the circus, like catching it with our noses, That's how I feel when I watch those, I would say, modern genre films that are using a lot of things and combine them together. And that's what you do, actually, because we have those like visual signals. Oh, that comes from this kind of, but it's not the same. It's not cliche because it's switched around and put in the different order. So it's like a game. Do you think about your viewers as like partners in crime, let's say it?
All the time. I mean, I've never understood the idea of making a film I do, as an artist, I can understand making something for yourself, but filmmaking for me is it's so based on the reaction that you get. it's a conversation. So I say what I have to say, and then you're going to hear what they, the response. And I feel like, so because I treat it kind of conversationally, I'm always thinking about the viewer. And to the extent that for this film in particular, and most of my other films, I tend to shoot and write films where you could understand them without even hearing them. So A Fire in the Cold Season is actually a really good example. If there was no Polish subtitles, or if it was on mute, you should be able to put together the film. And I think that for me is sort of like, I like treating the viewers with enough respect to know that they will be able to put the film together regardless of knowing the little things that are being said. And I've had some trouble in the past where Newfoundlanders can have thick accents and things like that, depending on where you're from and in the island. And I've had film festivals, even though they're speaking English, ask me to subtitle it in English. And then I subtitle it, but because the dialect is so strong, the subtitles don't make any sense either. So you should be able to understand what's happening without subtitles, right? So I don't know. I think viewers are really important for my films, and I think I have a lot of fun. And you don't want to have fun alone. You want to have
that's true. It's always a game, especially with genre, so you need those partners. But tell me about the actors. Are they also part of this process in a way that you, of course, you write the story, you have visual ideas how you want to look for the film to look. But what about the people that are, playing the game with you in this field that the film is? So how does it work with them? Who are they, and what's the process with them?
I tend to treat all aspects of the film the same way. Like the cast, I'll treat it, at least the key cast, the main few people. I'll treat that the same way as I treat the director of photography, our composers. Like everyone was involved from a very early stage so that we could collaborate. Like I'm not the kind of person that gets somebody involved and says, okay, go, here's your script, just do it. It's always like a collaborative process. And, me and the composers worked on this film the composers were actually involved before anybody else, before the cinematographer, before that cast. So, I'm very collaborative. And with the cast members, I actually wrote the film with quite a few of them in mind. I say out of the lead 4 people, 2 of them were it was written with them like already cast. One of them, the lead female playing Mona, her name is Michaela Karimsky. She, even though I didn't write it with her in mind, I had actually come across, it's actually kind of strange. I came across a picture of her on Instagram or something because we knew people in common. And I saved it as a reference because I really liked the way she looked and I saved it as a reference for the film. I was like, okay, this is a good reference for the film. And then months and months later, I was scrolling through my references with my producers one of my producers in Toronto, and he recognized her and said, oh, I know her. That's just Michaela. I went to school with her. And I reached out to her and we met. And that was probably like 5 months before we even filmed. And so from that point, even though I didn't have her booked, I sort of spent the rest of my editing of the script and planning around her, even though she wasn't involved. And then she ended up being involved. So I do really latch on to people. And I have a hard time saying, oh, I'm not going to cast them if I had them in my mind. So I think we auditioned her, and I'm pretty sure we had one other audition that I promised somebody, but we didn't audition anybody for her role. It was like she was it. Same with the lead, Steve. He's a really good friend of mine. He's a very, very good friend of mine, and I actually wrote the film with him in mind as a villain.
Oh.
And we were hanging out one day, and I said, do you want to play the lead in this film? He said, okay. Like that was it. There was no audition.
A few words, I would say.
There was nothing. He doesn't do auditions. He doesn't like to rehearse. He just shows up and he knows his lines, and it's great. But I don't know. The casting for me is a lot like everything else. When I get the look in mind, when I get the sound in mind, it's very hard for me to change my direction because I've been writing it for years with them in mind. So.
Yeah, before we go to the music, because that's also a part that I really want to ask you about, I wanted to ask more about the character of Mona, because also on this visual level, the image that's going to stay with me, like I guess forever, is her with this like hair like this, with the belly. and the guns, like kind of preparing herself to war. So I was curious about your attitude to writing female characters, because she's the only one, basically, in the film. Which is not, of course, I'm a feminist and so on and so forth, and critical approach to the representation of females on the screen, but I don't have a problem at all. It's not a critical question. I was just curious how you work with that, because as I know, you also have a writing collaborator that you wrote, the story was coined by both of you, right? With Kayla.
Yeah.
And I was just curious how you, because there's, as I said, men of few words. It's a man world. We know a lot of those men that are in your story, and there's only one Mona. So I was just curious how you, as a writer and a director, work with the female character. That's the question.
I mean, I'm sure this is and I wouldn't mind if it was a critical question, honestly, because it actually has.
But I'm so sorry. I don't have a problem with her. There's no criticism.
Like it doesn't bother me. I've had a few. This has come up in both I noticed this way, or actually some people have been very critical of it. And we knew making the film that we weren't going to pass any of those. What's the test where it's like if there's more than one woman?
Backdoor test.
No, we knew past that. We weren't going to pass that.
But like for example, Gravity by Alfonso Cuarón.
Also doesn't pass it.
Doesn't pass it, and Sandra Bullock is for 2 hours on the screen, and she talks a lot. So, it's just a basic thing to use it sometimes, but nothing definitive.
We had a bit of problem. I mean, so the way funding happens in Canada, it's actually very similar to a lot of European countries. Like there is a government funding for films, and early on when we were trying to get the film funded, obviously I'm a man, and writing a woman sometimes is a bit difficult, especially for me because I'm trying to write one. She's particularly vulnerable, and it was a little bit more difficult for me. And she really was she was sort of like built on a bunch of relationships that I had with women. Like she was sort of like a combination of people in one, and that made it a little bit easier because I was basing her on real women. That made it a little bit easier. But I wanted her to be vulnerable, and one of the things that came up was quite a few drafts in. We decided to eliminate basically any other female presence whatsoever because it started to feel more like we kind of wanted her to feel like she was alone, kind of being circled by sharks, like she's the only.
She's also alone in the forest, like one figure among this like big world, as the male characters in this one of the first shots, right? She's going through the world on her own, but there's still hope that it's going to change that, and then you give her a daughter.
There's something nice about the last shot being like that's something that people have caught on to. We had a screening in Iceland, and I got a really, really nice message afterwards from somebody who essentially was frustrated that she was the only woman in the film until the very last moment, and you realize, oh, now she has a daughter, and actually, like it's a nice moment. But it was supposed to be on, it's on purpose. Like she was the only female, so that she would feel more isolated. It's very subtle in the film, but it's implied that she's not from there.
She calls like somewhere.
Yeah, she's estranged from her family. They don't know where she is. She's surrounded by people who her husband knew or her boyfriend knew. So she's very guarded. She's very vulnerable, but she pretends she's not. She was kind of a complicated character, so I had a hard time trying to make sure that she felt real, but that I wasn't making her too tough or too vulnerable. Like that was a bit of a weird, tightrope walk for a little while. And then, after getting input from people in the script stage, especially women, that I know that write film and work in film, that's when I started getting a better understanding of, okay, well, what is too vulnerable or what is too tough? Because you don't want her to be one of the guys because that wasn't the point of the film, right? She's supposed to be a little bit more vulnerable and not really, and not want to be. She's the kind of person who is vulnerable but doesn't want to be vulnerable.
Yeah,
so she
plays that she's tough in a way, like showing her like strength outside. But and for me, honestly, as a female watching your film, I felt like it's okay that she's on her own because, like, of course, the film critics or film scholars, we always talk about the fact that we need more female characters together, working together in the story, you know, just, for example, to pass the Bechdel test, at least.
Yeah.
If the daughter said something to her about the weather, you would pass, you know, because the daughter is out there. That would be just this tiny thing. But it's not that, it doesn't mean that, you know, you need to put as much female characters if it doesn't really serve the story. And I really didn't feel that, okay, she is on her own. That's the life that she leads now, and she's trying to find a way out, in a way, maybe to the past, but that doesn't work because there's no answer. So maybe towards the future. And honestly, I really didn't feel that it's problematic. So, but I wanted to hear. I think that I wanted to hear that you really thought about that. And
I did. Yes, it wasn't just oops.
Good job.
Oops, forgot the movie. I mean, I'm sure that happens sometimes where someone writes a film and they realize afterwards they didn't put a single woman in it. That's not really the case for me. I mean, I tend to write very few characters as it is. Like, I have a couple of other screenplays that are in development right now, and out of two that I'm thinking about that are quite far along. There's less than 10 characters in the whole film that ever come and go, and of the main 4 characters in both scripts, it's like half and half, female, male. But for me, it's more about, I guess, quality of character than quantity. And I think that what's interesting about Fire in the Cold Season is that Mona is so strong and gets so much time dedicated to how, you know, independent she is. But a lot of the male characters are pretty, they just sort of like eat themselves. Like they're not really strong characters, and a lot of them are very, very vulnerable and very sort of, you know, they're sort of disposable. Yeah. And she's not disposable. They treat her like she's disposable, but they're all disposable. So I think that's kind of interesting.
That's really interesting thought. Yeah.
And I think Newfoundland is a very you know, it's a pretty tough place. You know, there's a lot of fishing and hunting, and it's hard to live here. But it's a very, I don't even know how to say it. It's a very, even though the men often were out fishing or the men were out logging or doing whatever they had to do, and it's a very tough place, that means that the women were home taking care of everything. And so Newfoundland, I always say Newfoundland was a very matriarchal place. Like women run the families, and you know, everyone has nothing but, you know, respect for their mothers and their grandmothers, and it's a very matriarchal place in that way. And so for me, when I write female characters, I always think I actually tend to write very tough female characters, and I almost need to try doing someone who's a little bit more sensitive, because I tend to write very like tough, driven characters, and I think that's just my experience living in Newfoundland. And you know, I have a 7-month pregnant fiance who's like on the ocean with me fishing every day. Like, wow. You know, it's a tough place, so I tend to write tough females, and it just sort of comes naturally.
Okay. As I said before, I wanted to ask you about the music, because as I can imagine, I've been to Canada once before, but not far away from Vancouver. But what I remember, it's like really silent. There's not too much sound going on because it's those beautiful, empty, big spaces. So I imagine that also Newfoundland can be quite quiet and silent place. But there's so much going on in the audiosphere of your film. There is this music, which is so much out there, and it gives it's kind of, I don't like this expression, but let me use it. It's like a character itself, you know, the sound sphere and all that. So can you tell us a bit about working with Matt and Kimmo? Because you said before that they were in the process long time before anybody else, basically, before the actors. So what was your ideas and how you discussed that, how to give the score to this quite silent place?
Actually, the day they were involved, well, Matt in particular, so we're all pals, but Matt and I had worked together. Matt and Kimmo and I had worked together on my very first short film in 2013. So Matt and Kimmo are in a lot of bands, but the band they have together is called Hex Vessel, and they're quite a popular band in Finland. They tour Europe all the time, and I got connected with them because I know a lot of musicians and stuff like that. And then anyway, through the jigs and the reels, they did a short film with me. And so the day the day I got the letter saying I was getting funding for this film, I emailed Matt immediately. So we didn't even have there was nothing in place yet. I just knew I had funding for the film. We probably didn't shoot it for another 5 months, but I wrote Matt and said, so I'm making this movie, like, you need to be involved. You need to, and he wrote me back right away and said that he wanted to, because when I wrote him, I said, okay, it's set in Newfoundland. He was very familiar with Newfoundland at this point. It's set in Newfoundland, but I want it to sound like a Western movie soundtrack, but I want you to use Celtic and like folk instruments. And it's like, oh, and I also want it to sound a little bit psychedelic. And he just was like, okay, well, we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it, but like I'm in, And that's exactly what happened. We shot the film. I went to Finland when the film was in the process, and we sat down and went through every scene, like every minute by minute, to talk about it. And Matt and Kimmo were brilliant about giving certain aspects of the film certain sounds, and then when those parts of the film come together. So, for example, the opening has a very distinct sound. There's like a harmonium, and it's very droning. And then, the first time you meet a particular character, they'll have their own sound that sort of comes in, or maybe not sound, but they have their own pace. And then as those elements come together, so when the main characters meet for the first time, they have a very specific sound that is all those sounds coming together. And they were very, very thoughtful and very collaborative. And they did it all by themselves. It was just like incredible how much work they did for this tiny movie, right? And I'm in Newfoundland and they're in Finland, and it was just like a very, very global collaboration. And I don't know. I think the film, the soundtrack for me is its own. It could stand apart so strongly from the film, just as a piece of music, because they put so much care into it. And I think it's really important for me to collaborate with people that understand that, the soundtrack or the actual images themselves or whatever it is, they can have their own interpretation of the story. So I wrote the story one way, then I directed it another way, and then it gets shot another way, and then it gets scored. So like there's just so many interpretations of the film going on, and I think Matt and Kimmo did like a very, very interesting interpretation of the material. Like I feel like you could listen to that and just picture the landscape.
Yeah, that's true. And at the same time, I think it works on this level that you said before, that not everybody, even if they are English-speaking person, would understand exactly what the characters are saying, but the images and genre and, of course, the music work together so well that you could just watch it and you would know like what's going on and what's the story. All those guys are in conflict because we can hear it, we can see it. So if they speak about some money and this like relations between them, you are like, okay, but I can already know that. So the spoken language is part only of that process. So that really works. And I really love the music. I'm already the follower of their band. So
I'm gonna release it at some point because I actually have a copy somewhere of we did a short film and they put a record out of the short film music, and people really liked it. And it was the same thing. Like, can you sort of blend the sort of Northern European folk sound that you do with Newfoundland folk sounds? Because Newfoundland music is very important here. And when you blend those things together, you get something pretty special, especially when, and Matt is really open when I'm saying things like, oh, can you put throat singing in there? And he's like, okay, and he makes it work. And it's just, he's a very, very, very brilliant musician. And I think that it's really important for me to give musicians that I collaborate with the openness to just do what they feel like is the right, and I think they respect, I think they really enjoy working that way, because a lot of composers tend to just be told, this is how it needs to sound. And I think they get really excited when you're allowed to just do, whatever you want.
Coming from a place that has so much space, it would be really strange if you didn't give space to other people in a way, because you have it in you. I'm looking at the watch, and we are talking for almost 40 minutes, so it's a bit even longer than we planned. I hope it's okay with you that we overscheduled in a way, but it was just really lovely to have this conversation with you, and I hope that everything's going to go smoothly with the Newfoundlander that is on the way already fishing with you both.
he or she will be in the boat next summer.
Awesome. I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed for that. And of course, for your next projects, I hope we're gonna have a chance to meet and talk more about your films. So thank you for finding time for us today. And enjoy the weather. I can see that it's sunny out there, and you said ocean, so it's really
nice.
great.
I'm gonna go out on the boat right now, actually, and try to catch some fish for supper.
Awesome! It's perfect plan for today. So thanks once again, and be safe, and good luck with everything. It was lovely to meet you, Justin. Bye.
Hopefully, there's a fun party tonight with the festival over.
Oh yeah! Last films, and then long night ahead of us, I would say.
Yes, I can imagine.
Thank you very much once again. Bye. Bye. Dziękuję bardzo. Już się rozłączyliśmy? Nie jeszcze? Jeszcze mogę mówić, tak? Dziękuję bardzo za nasze spotkanie i w ogóle za możliwość wzięcia udziału w naszym wspaniałym festiwalu po raz kolejny. Do zobaczenia, dbajcie o siebie i wszystkiego dobrego. Widzimy się w następnym odcinku. Miłego wieczoru.